I think everyone would agree in that you really are a paragon of the UK industry and also the games industry as a whole. So, you've certainly inspired a lot of people to get into the games industry. Myself included. But I want to ask you a little bit about how you got there. And I've got this brilliant picture which I'm going to bring up on the screen right now for everybody to see. But this is a picture of you and Steve Jackson holding up the first copies of Dungeons and Dragons. Which is a pretty, when you think of what that's gone on and the imagination that's, captured in many people. Elves, orcs, wizards, dwarves, they're now sort of a staple. But they were sort of a bit of a zeitgeist back in the 80s and 90s with what you were doing with Workshop, with Dungeons and Dragons, which what Mike Morhaime was doing with Warcraft. What were your influences? How did you get there? Was it sort of the Robert E. Howards and the Tolkiens that kind of inspired you to do that? Or I just want to sort of understand your journey of how you got to launching Games Workshop back in the 70s.
Well, Workshop didn't start off doing role-playing games. There was 3 school friends in a flat in London, Steve Jackson, John Peake and I. We'd come together in London for various jobs. They were all pretty rubbish jobs, low paid, boring jobs.
What sort of jobs did you do before? I'd love to know, Ian.
I was a marketing executive for an oil company.
That doesn't sound like a dull, boring. That sounds like a pretty good job.
I used to look out the window and think, why am I here? Because I always wanted to kind of forge my own destiny, but needs must at the time. Anyway, we had these pretty low-paid jobs, and we used to stay and play board games all the time. We thought this was, and we came to London in '73, and in '74 we thought, wouldn't it be great if somehow we could turn this hobby of playing into a business of some sort.
And what sort of board games do you remember playing? What sort of games did you?
We played Avalon Hill Games, SPI, Simulations Publications Inc., games like Diplomacy. And there was one particular game called Warlord that had been invented by a university lecturer at Sheffield University called Mike Hayes. And this is an incredible board game. If you like Risk, this is like Risk on steroids and takes all the luck out of it, of the combat. You have to pick up a great handful of dice and throw them. This was like kind of, thinking man's Risk in many ways. Anyway, we decided we'd somehow reach out and try and form a games community. So we thought the best way to do that is to create a newsletter, which we did, which we called Owl and Weasel. And this 4-page magazine we shipped out to everybody we knew in games. And one of the copies found its way on the desk of Gary Gygax, who lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And we hadn't sent to him directly, but he wrote to us and said, love your magazine. Here's this new game I invented. Would you like to review it? And this game was in a white box with a very average illustration on the cover. And we opened it up and there's just 3 rule booklets inside. And that game, of course, was Dungeons and Dragons. John wasn't impressed by it. Steve and I became totally obsessed with it. It was a game like none had ever been played before. It was a role-playing game where one person sat outside the game as a dungeon master and created a labyrinth of rooms and passageways and populated with monsters and treasure. And the other players, as we know, takes on roles of heroes and wizards and clerics after rolling up their character for various attributes like strength, intelligence, dexterity, wisdom, constitution, etc. And you go on kind of effectively theatre on the fly as the dungeon master explains to the players what they can see, and the players role playing in character type what would happen as they explore those dungeons. So the dungeon master would explain what could be seen. You're walking down a 20-foot wide passageway. After 20 feet on the left, there's a doorway with a keep out sign written in blood on it. What do you want to do? So they'd all talk. The wizard's going to get ready to cast a spell.
And were you a dungeon master or a player, Ian?
Both.
Give it all.
Both, obviously. Yeah. I had a dungeon called Sanctum of the Sixth Province, and my first D&D character was Anvar the Barbarian. he did pretty well. He's aging a bit now, but
Andy, have you ever been a D&D player or not really? No, not a thing.
I've never played Dungeons & Dragons ever. It's not my kind of game. I was going to ask Ian, what was the first board game, Ian, that you ever played ever?
I guess it was probably Monopoly. I played Monopoly at school because that's a game that was passed down. I mean, the thing about why Monopoly has survived the test of time is that not that it's a great game in itself, it's just that you never had to learn the rules. It was always passed down from parents to children. And so for everyone, it was like the go-to game for family entertainment. Yeah. And I used to play it a lot at school. In fact, I used to win quite a lot. And I got so complacent and smug about playing that I didn't used to collect the small rents if someone
very benevolent.
I'm not going to want it. I used to call it chicken feed, and therefore people started calling me Feed. My nickname at school was Feed.
I'm glad that you said that, because it's like my first game that I can play, board game that I can remember playing at all as a kid, was Monopoly, and I think it's my favourite game because I was so good at it and became incredibly smug and just decided to waive rents and be kind of a little bit of an altruist when playing. It was my granddad who taught me two games. He taught me Monopoly and Solitaire, as in not the card game Solitaire, but the pin game where you have to get one left at the end. And yeah, Monopoly and it is just so brilliant because you could play, obviously Solitaire you play on your own, but with Monopoly, with two players, it's really, really good. And more players, it sort of doesn't get better, it's as good.
It's funny, I've never really been a fan of Monopoly. I think it's the too much randomness, and you need a lot of patience for it, which is something that unfortunately I lack.
Right. Okay.
I mean, it's an okay game. It's a good entry level game. I used to play that in chess at school. But getting back to the D&D story, is that when Steve and I got obsessed about playing D&D, we looked in our pockets and found we had £50. So we ordered 6 copies of Dungeons and Dragons to Gary Gygax. And on the back of that order, he gave us a 3-year exclusive distribution agreement for the whole of Europe, because he was also operating out of a flat in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So we were both role-playing businessmen about a role-playing game.
Incredible.
So that's how we got the license for D&D. So we started selling it mail order. And we called the company Games Workshop because John was also he was a craftsman, and he would make wooden boards like backgammon boards. He was a civil engineer. That was his boring job, which he didn't really like either. But he would make these amazing backgammon boards and solitaire boards, which we made out of breadboards. And I'd go and sell them to game shops, and Steve would do the admin. Anyway, we called it Games Workshop because his bedroom looked like a workshop. It was full of wood shavings and dust and crap and tools. So that's where the name Workshop came from. And we'd see people on the street outside on a Saturday looking for this shop, holding their copies of Owl and Weasel, looking bemused. So we used to open up the window, looking for Workshop? Up here, mate. And of course, we didn't have a phone, and pre-mobile phones, and we didn't have a phone in our flat, but we had a public payphone on the ground floor, which we shared with our landlord, and it would ring. We knew it'd be for us. We would run down the stairs, always too late. Paddy was there first. Hello. Oh, you want Workshop, do you? Go to hell. Used to hang up on people. It was brilliant.
I love it.
But
and then
so that was the early 70s. And
well, we actually got a question on our YouTube chat, Ian. This is a first for INGames, so obviously we have you to thank. But Sloops of War asks, did the barbarian get killed or live to retire?
Well, some people might think he got killed, but I say he got resurrected several times and lived to a ripe old age when he was finally retired. Technically he died, but we did bring him back with various from help from various clerics.